Okay, so now what I'm going to do is actually take you through how you might construct your fruit stand. This is where having scanned them is important. Now notice that there are very few scans on the server. They should all be on the server. They should be JPEG or PDF. They should be named properly, and they should all be up there in good quality. So that's something you're definitely going to want to do. What I've done is I've taken one that was complete, and I'm going to use that as my example, and I'm going to show how to build it. So there's a number of ways that you can do this. Actually, two really easy ways of doing it. One is you can actually use your drawings to trace in SketchUp, or you can just take a drawing and take your scale and measure it, and then just start reconstructing it right in SketchUp. In some ways, that's the better way of doing it. Tracing is not as accurate, but because it's easy to describe how to just measure your drawing and then create it in SketchUp, but it's more difficult to show you how to trace it, I'm going to show you how to trace it. So if I go to File, Import, it lets me search for the file that I'm going to use, the scan, right? So I've got a JPEG here of a project, and the one thing I'm going to notice is I've selected the JPEG. I'm going to notice that I'm going to make sure it says use as image, because there's use as texture and use as new photo, as new matched photo. I got to make sure it says use as image, okay? And then I'm just going to hit import. It's going to take a little while, but eventually it'll show up at the end of my cursor. There it is. And what I'm going to do is click and then drag it out and then click again. And it doesn't really matter how big or how small at this point that you make it. But what I am going to do is I am now going to scale it to real size, because everything in SketchUp is real life scale. If you want something 12 feet, in SketchUp you draw it 12 feet. So here we've got a scale, a graphic scale, and so I'm going to try to read that. I'm thinking this means a foot, and I'm guessing that this is going to be about 36 inches. And I don't really know for sure, but that's going to be my guess. So we'll say that the height from ground to top is 36 inches. Okay, so what we'll do here, this is unique. This is not something that's intuitive at all, but I'm going to show you how to scale a drawing in SketchUp. Okay, so here we've placed the photo, and what we're going to do is take this photo and we're going to put it on a layer. Now this is not critical to scaling, but I want my photos on a separate layer. The way we use layers is it's not like Photoshop where things are over top of each other, you know, and it's really, layers are used in order to hide things or show things. So maybe actually I might take a quick diverge here quickly and go to one of these other drawings that I had opened before and quickly show you layers. So here I've got some geometry, and if I wanted to hide this geometry for some reason, I might put this geometry on a layer, and then that way you can see here that I can control the visibility. I can turn that layer's visibility off or on. And so how I get this onto a layer is a little bit unique. Okay, so first thing you have to know about geometry in SketchUp is you always, without exception, draw your raw geometry, right, while you're on layer 0. Layer 0 is the default. In fact, you don't even have to know anything about layers. You don't have to open the layers panel. Whenever you're drawing, if you do drawings, it's always on layer 0. The difficulty comes in when people start to add layers and then they click this little button down here, and it's this little button that puts you on a new layer. And so now you start drawing other geometry on that layer. Now that is a bad thing. And then maybe they'll come up here and they'll switch back to layer 0. Do not do that. Never go off of this layer. Now, you can touch other layers, but so long as you don't click this little radio button, because this means you're actually going to be switching to that layer. I'm not going to go through all the difficulties of why that screws people up, but it does. And you must always only ever draw your geometry on layer 0. Now you can tell by looking at entity info that this geometry is on layer 0. This geometry, tisk tisk tisk, this is on layer 1. This is not layer 0. This geometry should not be on any other layer except layer 0, so do not do that, ever. Now for me to get this back onto layer 0, I've selected it. I'm going to select it all. I'm going to come down here and select layer 0, and phew, now it's on layer 0. Okay, so let's just avoid ever drawing on anything other than layer 0. Here, I'm going to get rid of layer 1 now. We don't need it. We never are able to get rid of layer 0, and why would we? Layer 0 is our friend, but we want to do all our geometry on layer 0. So you say, well, how do we use layers then? Well, here's how you use layers. Geometry itself is always on layer 0, but if you put that geometry in a container, such as a component or a group, that component or group can go on a layer. Okay, so I'm going to select all this geometry, right-click, and put it in a group. Okay, so now this group could go on a new layer. So I'll start a brand new layer, and we'll call this blue. I'm going to make a group out of this, make group, and I'm going to make out of this one a component, looks good. Alright, so now I have groups and components and some raw geometry. I'm going to make a few more layers here. Let's just add another layer, and we'll call this one red, and then we'll make another one, and we'll call this one tan. Okay, so of all of these things, what can go on layers? This is raw geometry. This cannot go on a layer. The only way this could go on a layer is if I put it into a group, and then it could go on a layer. Let's try this. Oh, yeah, this is good. This is in a group. This could go on a layer. Let's put this blue thing on the layer called blue. So how we do that is we have to have the entity info window up, and so when we select it, we see that the entity info tells us that we're on layer 0. All we have to do to get it on a different layer is to select that layer. So I'm going to select blue, and now it's on the blue layer. Okay, so let's try that again. Let's select this red rod, and then we come up here and we see that right now the group is on layer 0, and we'll make it go to the red layer. Okay, so now it's on the red layer. If you need proof of that, you can come over here and you can turn off the visibility of the red layer, and that disappears. You can turn off the visibility of the blue layer, and that disappears. Now, we haven't done anything with the tan. It's not on its own layer. Even though we have a tan layer, we haven't put this tan geometry or piece of whatever it is onto the tan layer. So if I turn the tan layer off and on, nothing happens. But if I go ahead and select it and come over to Entity Info and go to Layers and find the tan layer, there we go. Then if I turn off the visibility of the tan layer, it goes away. In fact, I can turn off the visibility of all of these things, and I can turn them back on again. What's important to note here is that I haven't done anything with the geometry. So if I were to actually go into, let's go into the red one here. If I edit the red group, just double click, and I touch on any of the raw geometry that's inside there, you'll see that it's still on layer 0. And that is very important. And you'll see it again with this group. That geometry is still on layer 0. Now, this group isn't on layer 0. This group is on layer blue. Alright? So you can put all this stuff, you can put any group or component on any layer you want, so long as the geometry inside of it is on layer 0. That's very, very important. Now I could take these two groups and I could put these two on yet another layer. So let's add another layer. And I'm going to go ahead and you can see that there's nothing showing up here. Like if I just select this one thing, it says, oh, it's on a blue layer. I select this one, it's on a red layer. If I select two of them, it says, well, I don't know what one you want me to tell you is on what layer because they're both on different layers. So now I'm just going to go here and I'm going to say, put it on this new layer called another layer. And now if I use the visibility, I can turn those layers off and on. Now you'll also notice that it no longer affects the blue, the visibility of the blue and red are no longer effective because these are no longer on the blue and red layer. I moved them to another layer. And so it can get really complicated. You can really get, you can bury these in layers that in such a way that it becomes very confusing. But it's actually not confusing if all you realize is that the geometry that you draw should always be on layer 0. You never have to click on any of these little radio buttons, ever, right? And then if you want something to be controlled so that you can hide it, or, you know, hiding is one way of thinking about layers, but, you know, another way is that I can grab this thing. If I hide certain things in a model, it just makes it easier to see what I'm doing in the other aspects of my model, right? So hiding is one thing, but you know, it's not just for visibility's sake alone. It's to make it's to make it easier for you to see what you're doing when you're building your model. Okay, so let's go back to here. And what I want to do is I want to put this image on a separate layer so that as I'm building my model, I could turn this image off and on. So obviously right now it's on layer 0. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a group and then I'm going to put it on a different layer. So I'm going to start by adding a layer and I'll call it image. Okay. Now, right here, I could just right-click and say, make group, right? Except I can't, because the weird thing about SketchUp is that an image, like a picture that you bring in, can't be made a group. And so what you have to do is you have to actually have some other geometry somewhere in your SketchUp model, and if you select that other geometry and your image, those two can become a group. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a line somewhere, like just to get some geometry, right? And I'll just select both of these two things, and now if I right-click, I can make a group. Okay, so now I'm able to make it a group. Now what's really important about that is if I want to scale this, we didn't just do this. We didn't just put this image in a group so that we could stick it on a group layer. But by the way, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to I meant on an image layer. There. So now we can hide this image if we want, right? We can turn the visibility of it off and on. And also this geometry is in that group. But we didn't just make this image a group so we could stick it on an image layer that we could turn off and on. We also made it a group because what I want to do with this image is scale it up or down to be a real scale, something that I can actually work with. Excuse me. So here we've got a human figure. This is very important to have a human figure so we can judge our designs against the human. And we can see that if we measure, he's about you know, close to 5.5 feet, 5'4". Yeah, there we go, 5.5 feet. And so if what I were to do, what I want to do is scale this drawing. But if I scaled this entire file, this entire SketchUp file, if I scaled it up, this man would be bigger. If I scaled this whole thing down, this man would become smaller. Everything in this whole SketchUp world would be big or small. I don't want to scale everything in my model. I don't want the man to be smaller or larger. I just want this image to be smaller or larger so that I can start using it to build my model from. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it inside of its container. If I actually, because it's in a group, if I go into the group, I can do anything I want inside this group, and it won't affect all the geometry that's outside of the group in the rest of my SketchUp model. See, because I could already have, besides this man, I might have other like buildings, and if I wanted to scale this image down, if it weren't inside the group, I'd end up scaling all my other buildings too small, right? That'd be a problem. So I've got this in a group. I'm going to scale this drawing to be the right size in SketchUp world that I need it to be. Now I'm going to make the assumption that from this point here to this point here is 3 feet. In fact, I'll just draw a little line here. I'm going to say from here to here. And so that's what you want to do. You want to have somewhere on here you're going to need a dimension, because you're going to want, you have to have a dimension so you know how to scale this thing, okay? Okay, so I know that from here to here has got to be 3 feet. Even if right now it's not actually 3 feet, because who knows, I've just brought this in and made it a certain size. I don't know what size this thing is. All I know is from here to here, eventually I want this line to be 3 feet long. I want it from ground to the top of here to be 3 feet. Alright, so how I do that is I come over here to my measure tape. It's the little tape measure tool, and I touch on this end, click, and I touch on this end and click, and it doesn't matter actually how much it's measured. I don't really care how long it really is. All I want to do at this point is type in how long it should be, and that is 3 feet, and hit enter. And it says, do you want to resize the active group or component? Why, yes, thank you. And you'll notice that it does increase the size, but it didn't increase the size of the man. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. Again, what I do is I decide from one point to the next that it needs to be a certain height. So I take my tape measure tool, I come over here and I just click from one end to the other. And again, I don't care how, like in SketchUp, if I were to just measure it right now, let's just measure it. Okay, this line happens to be 2 feet and 5 7/16 of an inch. I don't care. I don't need to know that. What I need to do is simply make 2 clicks and then enter what I actually want that line to be. All right, so my one click is here, my next click is here, and then I type in, I'm going to use inches, I'm going to say 36, and hit enter, and then it says, do you want to resize it? Why, yes, thank you. And it does resize it, but it doesn't resize the man because he's outside the group, okay? He's not being affected. Okay, so now if I measure, now I actually do want to find out what the length of this line is. It should be 3 feet. So now if I click and measure it, aha, indeed, it is 3 feet long, you can see. So, perfect. We're looking good. So, I actually don't need that line there anymore. I'm just going to erase it. In fact, I don't even need this geometry in here anymore. I can erase it. And then click out of the group. And now we have a perfectly scaled drawing from which to sort of trace our components. Or trace the components of our design. Not to be confused with SketchUp components. So we'll trace the geometry here, and we'll make them into a SketchUp model. Okay, so I'm first going to make a column here. I'm going to do that, and I know that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. So I'm going to make a column, and then from that column, I'm going to turn it into a component. And then that way, because I have 4 of them, that way I just make one of these things, and then I copy it 4 times. And if I ever have to go in and edit that component, all I have to do is edit it once and they'll all change. Okay? So we can make this column a number of ways. One way is, I'm going to show you, is let's just look straight down on this thing. So we come up here and we can just look at the top view. Now you'll notice that yes, it's a top view, but it's not orthographic. We're still looking at perspective. I mean, you can still see this man. You can still see him in perspective. So what I need to do is go to Camera, Parallel Projection. So it takes it off of perspective and goes to parallel projection, and now we're looking straight down on this image. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take half of this thing and then sort of rotate it around. So I'm going to draw sort of the profile of this thing, and then I'm going to put it on a lathe, a computer lathe, and I'm going to sort of turn it into a three-dimensional object, a pier. Now there's different ways I could do this, and in fact maybe I'll show you the hard way first. So the hard way first would be, let's just get some measurements here. So this is approximately a foot, all right, and it goes from a foot to approximately 9 inches, 9.5 inches. Well, what we're probably going to want to do is use our 2x4 dimensions, and so we know that it would be better if this were, so 12 inches, that works great. Let's see how high this thing is. It's saying it's 3 inches. Well, let's make it 4 inches. That would be a 2x4. This whole thing is, it's saying it's very difficult because it's so small. This is where it's easier just to measure. So here it's saying it's 4 3/8 of an inch. Well, we know that it's not 4 3/8 of an inch. We know that it's actually just going to be 4 inches. So we know this is going to be the 2x4 right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I know that it's got to be 4 inches tall and 12 inches long. So I'm going to do the 12-inch long geometry first. So I'll type in 12, comma 4. I'm going to hit return. There it is. Now it seems like it was a little bit longer than 12 inches, and that's okay. I can just select this edge, use my move tool, click, and drag it out a little more or a little less. Let's drag it out to be maybe another inch. So it was 13 inches. Okay. Wait for the computer to catch up here. All right. Now you'll notice you can't see through it anymore. So what you could do is come up here and hit the little X-ray button, and that makes all your geometry see-through. And now I can see through it, and so now I can actually see what's going on. So here I could go ahead and take this, and I can just sort of trace it by eye. But that's not a very good way of doing it, sort of tracing it by eye. This doesn't produce very good work. So instead what we want to do is, again, go back to our tape measure tool, and if we click on an edge and drag, we can actually drag out a little guideline. And so here we're going to drag it down 1 inch, and then here we're going to say it's going to taper in by 1 inch as well. And on this end we'll taper it in by 1 inch. And then we can actually take our line tool and go click, 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 click. And now we've got a good geometry. I'll take my eraser tool and just get rid of this extra geometry here that we don't need. And now I've got myself a good surface, and I could extrude this surface by 13 inches. So now if we were to look down on this thing, you can see that we almost have it, but look, we didn't get the edges. So now we've got to somehow put this taper around the edge. So you can see how this is actually kind of a hard way of doing it. So I'm just going to undo that. What I want to do well, and in fact, to be fair, we could have also just drawn a 13 by 13 inch square. Okay, and we'll go ahead and center this. Now I'm holding down Shift to lock it, and I'm inferencing from the center of this square to the center of this. Okay, so now it's all lined up nicely. And then I could extrude this up, let's say 3 inches. I'm going to turn X-ray off just so we can see what we're doing a little bit easier. So wait for it. Okay. So go ahead and extrude this up 3 inches, and then if I hold down Option and extrude it up 1 more inch, I get this extra little line in there. When you hold down Option, it adds to the push-pull. See, every time, an Option is a toggle, by the way. You can just tap on Option and it keeps the plus sign on there, or if you tap it again, it takes the plus sign off. So if I wanted to extrude this up, I could just keep extruding it. But if I hold Option and go to extrude it, it extrudes it from that point and keeps the line. So you see, if I just go to extrude it, it carries it up. If I tap Option, it extrudes it from that point and leaves a line behind for me. Okay, so at this point, what I could do is I could scale this top in to get that taper, that little chamfer there. So I could hit S for scale, grab one of my corners and hold down Option and drag, and I could guess that that's probably where it would work, but that's not very accurate either. So what I would actually want to do is, let's go ahead and I'll drag that down, and we've got to heal that edge. Okay, what I actually want to do is I want to draw this shape here. So what I'm going to do is actually draw that shape. Remember, I go in 1 inch and I go up 1 inch, and then I come back down, and now I have that shape. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this profile all around my geometry. So to do that, I need to select a path. So I'm going to select the path first, and I could go ahead and I could select these edges. I'm going to make sure all of them are selected. And then I use this little tool up here called Follow Me tool. And then I select my geometry, and whoosh, it just follows it all the way around. Now I'll show you that again. I'm going to undo. The fast way is, instead of having to select, because this is all connected, instead of having to select all the edges, I'll just touch the middle here, and I'll select the face. And so by selecting the face, it implies that I'm going to use all my edges. Okay, so I'm just going to touch the face. That implies that my edges are all going to be the path. And then I use the Follow Me tool, and boom, it just follows all those edges with that profile. And there I have it. I'm going to do it one more time in a different way, so let me undo that. This time, instead of selecting anything, I'm just going to grab the Follow Me tool, and as I hover over geometry, I could click and drag it. And you see that it's looking for a path, and as I find a path for it, it is drawing my geometry. But the drawback is, there you go, the drawback is that I have to be pretty careful that I find a path. So I like to select my path first, and then with the Follow Me tool, just grab my geometry, and boom. Right, so here I just select my path, grab the Follow Me tool, touch on my geometry, and it's done. Okay, so you can see how that's possible, and here I might want to push-pull this pedestal up to the top here now. There we go. So I described this as the hard way of doing it. This isn't really that hard. In fact, it's actually kind of easy, because now I can just pull the rest of my pedestal up. first I'd have to know how high to go, so I might want to measure it. Looks like we're going up another foot, so I could just go up by another foot, 12 inches, and there it is. So far it looks actually pretty easy, right? Now that is a legitimate way of doing it, but I'm going to show you a different way. So I'm just going to select all this geometry and just kind of move it out of the way a little bit here. The way that I'm doing it is, because this whole thing is symmetrical, I'm just going to take a line down the center all the way up, and let's say it's 6 foot 10. So we'll go up by 6 foot 10 inches, and there we go. And I'm going to get rid of all this geometry over here. I don't need this geometry. I don't need my guidelines. If you do want to erase all your guidelines in one move, you can just go up to Edit, Delete Guides. When I hit Edit, Delete Guides, that guideline goes away. There was nothing wrong with the guideline. If I didn't want it, I could either use my eraser tool to get rid of it, but if I had dozens of guidelines, it might be nice to just go up to Edit, Delete Guides. Okay, but anyways, here I am. In fact, I'm going to actually draw another guideline back because I'm aligning some things here, so it's nice to have my guidelines. I'm going to go ahead and measure up here, make sure, okay, that was, it's like looking like 1 foot and 1 inch and a quarter. That's fine. I guess that's what we'll do. And so I'll just draw this geometry. It actually looks like it's sitting in a little bit from there. So let's grab my little tape measure tool again, and it looks like it's sitting in by 1/2 inch. So grab my rectangular tool and draw it like that. Now I could be wrong. I could be getting his details incorrect here, but you know, you'll know your own details. I'm just drawing this, you know, as I see it. So let's go ahead and measure up from here to find out how tall this is going to be. That's going to be 2 inches, and we'll just go ahead and draw that. All right. We'll measure up what this is supposed to be. Looks like to be 3 inches. No, it wasn't 3 inches. Looks like the whole thing is going to be 4 inches. And then down from there is going to be 1.5 inches. Alright. And back from here, it looks like these two things are aligning. The base of the column and the this middle part of the plinth. Sorry, getting a little tired here. So let's just go ahead and add that. And you see, all I'm doing is I'm constructing a profile of this thing. And then let's go ahead and say that this starts in a little ways, goes up to here, goes up to here. It's looking pretty good. And if we want, at this point, we could separate this out